Greetings, patriots and citizens. It is an honor to be here with you today. My name is Samuel Adams, and I have acquiesced to the request by a number of the citizenry to bring to you today my thoughts and a speech that I have given on August 1st, 1776. The idea of liberty and freedom is, what I understand, very much misunderstood, and it has become more of the actions of tyranny and despotism to which I have always been against. Some have queried whether or not I have taken and been the purveyor of riots, if I've been the purveyor of gross disturbances that have caused the citizenry to become destructive. None of that is true. In fact, I have been one that has always stood the ground that there should not be riots and that there should not be those types of destructions of personal property as was done to Governor Hutchinson's home. I was against that. I was against all of the issues of tarring and feathering. Now, you may query again as to my position in regards to that of the tea that was thrown over the ships in that December day. I must say very clearly that that was an action that was brought on by the merchants and by those of none other than the government itself. We had petitioned and requested very distinctly that the tea would be removed from Boston Harbor. We also knew that bringing that tea onto the land and being landed, as we called it, would result in the facts that we would immediately be responsible for all of the cost of that tea and every tax associated to it. It was better to take and have that mercantile product dismissed from amongst the people than to imperil us and force upon us payments as well as those types of taxes that we had no desire to pay. No other property was destroyed. No person was hurt or injured during that time. So what I understand that, and it's difficult for me to speak to you all in the manner in which I am because I just don't have that clear vision of all those that are in front of me at the moment. But it is very clear, and you must understand that as I am become aware of the riotous activities that are going on within the various states of this great union, that it causes me to pause, because what I understand, it is facilitated by that which I have called unconstitutional, being utopianism. Utopianism has been that all the way from the time of the Greeks trying to institute that, to have power over people. And there is no means and mechanism that a free people can become some kind of democracy. We have seen democracies fail. We know history on the failures of what that is. And utopianism, on top of that, allows tyrants to rule and dominate the rest of the people. I want to talk to you today from two specific time frames. One writing that I was called upon to compose in 1764, and that was the instructions of the town of Boston to our elected representatives. And understand that I had been elected and have been elected to office numerous times as a tax collector, as well as a representative to the General Council, and in that have been the secretary for that General Assembly. Then we will focus on much that is in this time of what I understand and what we always have understood to be a celebration of our declared independence. So in these next few moments, I want you to understand that what we always have done is that we would direct by letters of instruction to those whom we elected to office to act according to that which is the will of we whom elected them to that assembly. I understand that the elected now will do according to that which they please and try then to convince those that are the elector, the citizens, the electors, try to convince you that they know what's best and that they will make laws according to their best judgment instead of understanding the various principles of the foundation of this nation and that which our great founding fathers gave us. And to that, I would like to take and present to you first from May 1764 some of the key concepts that you need to call upon at this present time. This was written to Royal Taylor, James Otis, Thomas Cushing, and Oxbridge Thatcher, Esquire, that the freeholders and the inhabitants of the town of Boston, that they would be representing us in the General Assembly. So that which they were then elected by affords them the strongest testimony of that confidence which is placed in their integrity and capacity. Integrity and capacity. By this choice, they have delegated to you, that is us, the electorate, have delegated to the elected the power of acting in their public concerns, in general, as your own prudence shall direct you, always reserving to themselves, that being we the people, the constitutional right of expressing their mind and giving you fresh instruction upon particular matters as they at any time shall judge proper. We therefore, your constituents, take this opportunity to declare our just expectations from you, that you will constantly use your power and influences in maintaining the invaluable rights which and privileges of the province, of which this town is so great a part, as well those rights which are derived to us by the royal charter, as those which being proper to and independent on it, we hold essentially as free-born subjects of Great Britain, that you will endeavor as far as you shall be able to preserve that independence in the House of Representatives, which characterizes a free people, and the want of which may, in a great measure, prevent the happy effects of a free government. Cultivating as their which is ever desirable to good men when founded in principles of virtue and public spirit, and guarding against any undue weight which may tend to disadjust that critical balance upon which our happy constitution and the blessings of it do depend. And for this purpose, we particularly recommend it to you to use your endeavors to have a law passed whereby the seats of such gentlemen as shall accept the post of for profit from the crown or the governor while they are members of the House shall be vacated, agreeable to an act of the British Parliament, till their constituents shall have opportunity of re-electing them if they please, or of returning others in their room. Being members of that body, you will have a special regard to the morals of this people, which are the bias of public happiness. Is the basis of public happiness. The morals of this people, which are the basis of public happiness, and endeavor to have such laws made, if any are still wanting, as shall be best adapted to secure them. And we particularly desire you carefully to look into the laws of excise, that if the virtue of the people is endangered by the multiplicity of oaths therein enjoined, or their trade and business is unreasonably impeded or embarrassed thereby, the grievance may be redressed. As the preservation of morals as well as property and right, so much depends upon the impartial distribution of justice agreeable to good and wholesome law. My friends, there is so much more that we challenged these people that were elected as our representatives. It is imperative that you understand that it is about the virtue, it is about the morality that is the basis of public happiness. It is about the preservation of that morality as well as property and rights. It is that which is given to us by God that we have the ability to stand at, and that those elected officials are supposed to take and preserve for us. The whole idea of taking and looking at law and looking at that which is driving revenues for the governor, for that of the government in general, are those protecting our liberties? Are they moral? Are they those that would impact our businesses in a negative manner? If they are, we have a right to redress, and we have that great expectation that those that are elected to office will not try to impose more upon us, but will lessen, remove that which inflicts us in a way that will take and destroy our morality, our virtue, our businesses, our property, and the God-given rights we have as free citizens. I understand, sadly understand, that at this time, as it has been brought to my attention, that history is taking a course upon which all of those rights are being abridged. All of those rights of the morality, of rights to property, of rights that include the values and virtues to even have good justice, that which retains our history, is being attacked. And is being attacked in such a vicious manner that it is afflicting all good citizens, all moral people. And those afflictions are taking and rising to the levels of frustration that have not been seen since the time of King George. It pains me to hear that what is occurring now is that which has taken and destroying even the likes of some of those which I have had great relations with. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Madison, even my cousin John, and so many others, that the twisting of truth is such that it is destructive to the full understanding and the capacity of lawmakers, of governors, of those that are the legislatures in cities and towns to actually have any moral standing. The cowardness that is upon them is unspeakable. My friends, I will tell you, as we go to reflect next upon that which is that independence that we fought for. And yes, I even lost my son over. We know those pains. And those pains require us to act, require us to stand upon the virtues and moralities of those that came before us, and to take and understand that we can only make do and make right when we understand those provisions that God has given to us within the perspective of our natural rights. Many have asked, Sam Adams, you were what was called an anti-federalist. And I say, that it is true. And there were many others that we predicted that things of this nature could happen. Ladies and gentlemen, and great patriots, citizens, at this time of a serious contemplation of all events before us, I, Samuel Adams, have returned to be able to present with you and talk with you over the speech that I gave on August 1st, 1776. I introduced to you earlier a 12-year past document that I was asked to prepare for those within the legislature, that letter of instruction. I would highly encourage you to go back and to reference that and read it in its totality, because at that time we were already presenting what would be those injustices that were laid upon us, especially those that were happening by virtue of the governors coming right from the king's purse instead of that which was elected by we the people in relationship to the courts and judges. That was always something that we retained for ourselves, but now we were having all of that imposed upon us, and with that it would cause great issue of who did the judge serve? Who is it that they served? So as it moved through and as we engaged in war, as those first shots were fired in Lexington and then on to Concord, I praised God as I was heading to Philadelphia, and we took then up further discussions which brought us to that time in July and that great Declaration of Independence. I was asked, as some would call me the father of the American Revolution, to give a speech and explain to the people not only what brought about that great declaration, but the positions that we should hold dear in that great fight that we were now engaged in. And not only that, that all of the colonies had decided to participate in as we were standing against the tyrannies of Great Britain. So with that, my intentions for this next period of time that we have together is to read to you that as much as I possibly can, because this is a rather long speech, and a hot August day is bothersome to most people, especially in that weather that is there in Philadelphia. But I think it is incumbent upon me, and it is therefore incumbent upon you, to listen clearly. And again, go and look into those references where you can take and find a copy of this speech. So with no further ado, I will begin and give you no editorial. So please listen carefully and find that which is the published articles of this speech for August 1st, 1776, on the steps of the State House in Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress had met. Countrymen and brethren, I would gladly have declined an honor to which I find myself unequal. I have not the calmness and impartiality which the infinite importance of this occasion demands. I will not deny the charge of my enemies that resentment for the accumulated injuries of our country and an adder for her glory, rising to enthusiasm, may deprive me of that accuracy of judgment and expression which men of cooler passions may possess. Let me beseech you, then, to hear me with caution, to examine without prejudice, and to correct the mistakes into which I may be hurried by my zeal. Truth loves an appeal to the common sense of mankind. Your unperverted understandings can best determine on subjects of a practical nature. The positions and plans which are said to be above the comprehension of the multitude may be always suspected to be visionary and fruitless. He who made all men hath made the truth necessary to human happiness obvious to all. Our forefathers threw off the yoke of popery and religion. For you is reserved the honor of leveling the popery of politics. They opened the Bible to all and maintained the capacity of every man to judge for himself in religion. Are we sufficient for the comprehension of the sublimest spiritual truths and unequal to material and temporal ones? Heaven hath trusted us with the management of things for eternity, and man denies us ability to judge of the present or to know from our feelings the experience that will make us happy? You can discern, they say, objects distant and remote, but cannot perceive those within your grasp. Let us have the distribution of present goods, and cut out and manage as you please the interest of futurity. This day, I trust, the reign of political Protestantism will commence. We have explored the temple of royalty and found that the idol we have bowed down to has eyes which see not, ears that hear not our prayers, and a heart like the nether millstone. We have this day restored the sovereign to whom alone men ought to be obedient. He reigns in heaven, and with a propitious eye beholds his subject, assuming that freedom of thought and dignity of self-direction which he bestowed on them. From the rising to the setting of the sun, may his kingdom come. Having been a slave to the influence of opinions early acquired and distinctions generally received, I am ever inclined not to despise, but to pity those who are yet in darkness. But to the eye of reason, what can be more clear than that all men have an equal right to happiness? Nature made no other distinction than that of higher or lower degrees of power of mind and body. But the mysterious distribution of character has the craft of statesmen, more fatal than priestcraft introduced. According to their doctrine, the offsprings, and this is of statecraft, the offsprings of perhaps the lewd embraces of a successful invader, shall from generation to generation arrogate the right of lavishing on their pleasures a proportion of the fruits of the earth, more than sufficient to supply the wants of thousands of their fellow creatures, claim authority to manage them like beasts of burden, and without superior industry, capacity, or virtue. Nay, though disgraceful to all humanity by their ignorance, intemperance, and brutality, shall be deemed best calculated to frame laws and to consult for the welfare of society. Were the talents and virtues which heaven has bestowed on men given merely to make them more obedient drudges, to be sacrificed to the follies and ambition of a few? Or were not the noble gifts so equally dispensed with the divine purpose and law that they should, as nearly as possible, be equally exerted, and the blessings of providence be equally enjoyed by all? Away then with those absurd systems which, to gratify the pride of a few, debase the greatest part of our species below the order of men. What an affront to the King of the universe! To maintain that the happiness of a monster sunk in debauchery and spreading desolation and murder among men, of Caligula, of Nero, of a Charles, is more precious in his sight than that of millions of his supplicant creatures who do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with their God? No! In the judgment of heaven, there is no other superiority among men than the superiority in wisdom and virtue. And can we have a safer model in forming ours? The deity then has not given any order or family of men authority over others, and if any men have given it, they only could give it for themselves. Our forefathers, 'tis said, consented to be subjects to the laws of Great Britain. I will not, at present, dispute it, nor mark out the limits and conditions of their submission. But will it be denied that they contracted to pay obedience and to be under the control of Great Britain because it appeared to them the most beneficial in their present circumstances and situations? We, my countrymen, have the same right to consult and provide for our happiness, which they had to promote theirs. If they had a view to posterity in their contracts, it must have been to advance the felicity of their descendants. If they erred in their expectations and prospects, we can never be condemned for a conduct which they would have recommended had they foreseen our present condition. Ye darkness and darkeners of counsel, who would make the property, lives, and religion of millions depend on the evasive interpretations of musty parchments? Who would send us to antiquated charters of uncertain and contradictory meaning to prove that the present generation are not bound to be victims to cruel and unforgiving despotism? Tell us our pious and generous ancestors bequeathed to us the miserable privilege of having the rewards of honest industry, the fruits of those fields which they purchased and bled for, wrested from us at the will of men over whom we have no check? Did they contract for us that, with folded arms, we should expect that justice and mercy from brutal and inflamed invaders, which have been denied our supplication at the foot of the throne? Were we to hear our character as a people ridiculed with indifference? Did they promise for us that our meekness and patience should be insulted, our coasts harassed, our towns demolished and plundered, and our wives and offsprings exposed to nakedness, hunger, and death, without our feeling the resentment of men and exerting those powers of self-preservation which God has given us? No man had once a greater veneration for Englishmen than I entertained. They were dear to me as branches of the same parental trunk and partakers of the same religion and laws. I still view with respect the remains of a constitution as I would a lifeless body which had once been animated by a great and heroic soul. But when I am roused by the din of arms, when I behold legions of foreign assassins paid by Englishmen to imbrue their hands in our blood, when I tread over the uncoffined bones of my countrymen, neighbors, and friends, when I see the locks of a venerable father torn by savage hands, and a feeble mother clasping her infants to her bosom, and on her knees imploring their lives from her own slaves, whom Englishmen have allured to treachery and murder, when I behold my countrymen, once the seat of industry, peace, and plenty, changed by Englishmen to a theater of blood and misery, Heaven forgive me if I cannot root out those passions which it has implanted in my bosom and detested submission to a people who have either ceased to be human or have not virtue enough to feel their own wretchedness and servitude. My brethren and countrymen, I, Samuel Adams, now continue with this speech that I gave in August 1st, 1776, in regards to our Declaration of Independence. As I continue now, men who content themselves with the semblance of truth and a display of words talk much of our obligations to Great Britain for protection. Had she a single eye to our advantage? A nation of shopkeepers are very seldom so disinterested. Let us not be so amused with words. The extensions of her commerce was her object. When she defended our coast, she fought for her customers, and convoyed our ships loaded with wealth which we had acquired for her by our industry. She has treated us as beasts of burden, whom the lordly masters cherish, that they may carry a great load. Let us inquire also against whom she has protected us, against her own enemies, with whom we had no quarrel, or only on her account, and against whom we always readily exerted our wealth and strength when they were required. Were these colonies backward in giving assistance to Great Britain when they were called upon in 1739 to aid the expedition against the Carthaginian? They, at that time, sent 3,000 men to join the British army, although the war commenced without their consent. But the last war, 'tis said, was purely American. 'Tis this a vulgar error, which, like many others, has gained credit by being confidently repeated. The dispute between the courts of Great Britain and France related to the limits of Canada and Nova Scotia. The controverted territory was not claimed by any in the colonies, but by the Crown of Great Britain. It was therefore their own quarrel. The infringement of the right which England had, by the Treaty of Utrecht, of trading in the Indian country of Ohio, was another cause of the war. The French seized large quantities of British manufactures and took possession of a fort which a company of British merchants and factors had erected for the security of their commerce. The war was therefore waged in defense of lands claimed by the Crown and for the protection of British property. The French at that time had no quarrel with America, and as appears by letters sent from their commander-in-chief to some of the colonies, wished to remain in peace with us. The part, therefore, which we then took, and the miseries to which we exposed ourselves, ought to be charged to our affection for Britain. These colonies granted more than their proportion to the support of the war. They raised, clothed, and maintained nearly 25,000 men. And so sensible were the people of England of our great exertion that a message was annually sent to the House of Commons purporting, quote, that His Majesty, being highly satisfied of the zeal and vigor with which his faithful subjects in North America had exerted themselves in defense of His Majesty's just rights and possessions, recommend it to the House to take the same into consideration and enable him to give them a proper compensation. End quote. But what purpose can arguments of this kind answer? Did the protection we received annual of our rights as men and lay us under an obligation of being miserable? Who among you, my countrymen, that is a father, would claim authority to make your child a slave because you had nourished him in his infancy. It is a strange species of generosity which requires a return infinitely more valuable than anything it could have bestowed, that demands as a reward for a defense of our property a surrender of those inestimable privileges to the arbitrary will of vindictive tyrants, which alone give value to that very property. Political right and public happiness are different words for the same idea. They who wander into metaphysical labyrinths or have recourse to original contracts to determine the rights of men either impose on themselves or mean to delude others. Public utility is the only certain criterion. It is a test which brings dispute to a speedy decision and makes it appeal to the feelings of mankind. The force of truth has obliged men to use arguments drawn from this principle who were combating it in practice and speculation. The advocates for a despotic government and non-resistance to the magistrate employ reasons in favor of their systems drawn from a consideration of their tendency to promote public happiness. The author of nature directs all his operations to the production of the greatest good, and has made human virtue to consist in a disposition and conduct which tend to the common felicity of his creatures. An abridgment of the natural freedom of man by the institution of political societies is vindicable only on this foot. How absurd, then, is it to draw argument from the nature of civil society for the annihilation of those very ends which society was intended to procure. Men associated for their mutual advantage. Hence, the good and happiness of members, that is, the majority of the members of any state, is the great standard by which everything relating to that state must finally be determined. And though it may be supposed that a body of people may be bound by a voluntary resignation, which they have been so infatuated as to make, of all their interest to a single person or to a few, it can never be conceived that the resignation is obligatory to their posterity because it is manifestly contrary to the good of the whole that it should be so. These are the sentiments of the wisest and most virtuous champions of freedom. Attend to a portion on this subject from a book in our defense written, I had almost said, by the pen of inspiration. Quote, I lay no stress, says he, on charters. They derive their rights from a higher source. It is inconsistent with common sense to imagine that any people would ever think of settling in a distant country on any such condition, or that the people from whom they withdrew should forever be masters of their property and have power to subject them to any modes of government they pleased. And had there been express stipulations to this purpose in all the charters of the colonies, they would, in my opinion, be no more bound by them if it had been stipulated with them that they should go naked or expose themselves to the incursions of wolves and tigers. End quote. Such are the opinions of every virtuous and enlightened patriot in Great Britain. Their petition to heaven is, quote, "There may be one free country left upon the earth to which they may fly, when venality, luxury, and vice shall have completed the ruin of liberty there." End quote. Courage, my countrymen! Our contest is not only whether we ourselves shall be free, but whether there shall be left to mankind an asylum on earth for civil and religious liberty. Dismissing, therefore, the justice of our cause as incontestable, the only question is, what is best for us to pursue in our present circumstances? The doctrine of dependence on Great Britain is, I believe, generally exploded. But as I would attend to the honest weakness of the simplest of men, you will pardon me if I offer a few words on that subject. We are now on this continent, to the astonishment of the world, 3 million of souls united in one common cause. We have large armies, well disciplined, and appointed with commanders inferior to none in military skill and superior in activity and zeal. We are furnished with arsenals and stores beyond our most sanguine, cheerfully optimistic expectations, and foreign nations are waiting to crown our success with their alliances. There are instances of, I would say, an almost astonishing providence in our favor. Our success has staggered our enemies and almost given faith to infidels, so that we may truly say it is not our own arm which has saved us. The hand of heaven appears to have led us on to be, perhaps, humble instruments and means in the great providential dispensation which is completing. We have fled from the political Sodom. Let us not look back, lest we perish and become a monument of infamy and derision to the world. For can we ever expect more unanimity and better preparation for defense, more infatuation and counsel among our enemies, and more valor and zeal among ourselves? The same force and resistance which are sufficient to produce our liberties will secure us a glorious independence and support us in the dignity of free imperial states. We cannot suppose that our opposition has made a corrupt and dissipated nation more friendly to America, or created in them great respect for the rights of mankind. We can therefore expect a restoration and establishment of our privileges and a compensation for the injuries we have received from their want of power, from their fears, and not from their virtue. The unanimity and valor which will effect an honorable peace can render a future contest for our liberties unnecessary. He who has strength to chain down a wolf is a madman if he lets him loose without drawing his teeth and paring his nails. My dear friends and patriots, I do not have time to continue reading the rest of this speech to you. I challenge you to read the rest of it, because those who do not stand with us for liberty deserve it not. Those who would not stand with us, let the chains fall upon them lightly. Let them be the slaves of arbitrary power. Let them take and be consumed by that Unitarianism and that universalism that is subsuming all that I hear which is upon you right now. That of Plato does not work. You cannot have a democracy. We are a republic. We have fought for a republic. And we who were called anti-federalists are the true federalists. And our expectation for you, our posterity, is that you would stand according to those morals and virtues and principles given to you in the Declaration of Independence.
Hi friends, Dr. Mike Spaulding here to announce details of the Go Therefore 2020 conference. This year, we will be providing a powerful lineup of scholars, researchers, authors, and Bible teachers for the equipping and edification of the body of Christ. Please note that the Go Therefore 2020 conference is an online event. This will enable you to participate wherever you live. Registration is now open at www.gothereforeconference.com. The cost for this one-of-a-kind conference is only $59. The theme of this year's Go Therefore conference is What Now, Church? What lies ahead for the Church of Jesus Christ? How must we respond to the government's reaction to the coronavirus? What must Christians do to address the so-called new normal? This year, our speakers include Dr. Michael Lake of Kingdom Intelligence Briefing, Pastor Carl Gallups of Freedom Friday Radio, Pastor Caspar McCloud of Spiritual Encounters Radio, Russ Dizdar of Shatter the Darkness Ministries, David Heavner, actor and film director of The Last Evangelist on davidheavner.tv, Coach Dave Daubenmire of Pass the Salt Ministries, Pastor Brandon Gallups of Redeemed Ministries Healing and Recovery Center, author and researcher Doug Woodward, author and researcher Carl Tykrib, author, evangelist, and director of Hand of Help Ministries Michael Boldea, author and researcher L.A. Marzulli, researcher and Bible teacher David Paxton, constitutional scholar and host of Samuel Adams Returns Tom Navolis, author and evangelist Preston Condra, Stephen Menking, senior editor and host of On the Objective and the Amateur Society podcasts, David Arthur of I Belong, Amen Ministries, film director and researcher Tom Dunn, author and director of Omega Dynamics Jamie Walden, author and editor-in-chief of Technocracy News Patrick Wood, author, pastor, and president of Chafer Seminary Dr. Andy Woods, and of course me, Dr. Mike Spaulding. You may register right now at the conference website, www.gothereforeconference.com. The conference starts Friday, July 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and concludes Sunday, July 26th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. All registrants will have 2 full weeks to watch every presentation from this year's conference. Conference schedule is on the website, www.gothereforeconference.com. You do not want to miss this event. What now, church? God bless you.